Hello, and welcome. Tonight, I'd like to invite you on a gentle journey into the land of dreams, a place filled with soft forests, glowing lanterns, and kind friends you'll meet along the way. This bedtime story is called The Dream Walker's Lantern. Let's begin our story. Rowan never thought of themselves as particularly brave. They were kind in the quiet ways, holding doors without calling attention to it, returning a stranger's scarf on a windy day, picking daisies that had bent too far and tucking them into a glass by the kitchen sink. But brave? Brave made Rowan think of roaring dragons and glittering swords, of standing tall on stormy nights while the world rumbled. Still, the night the sky opened like a curtain and the land of dreams peered through, the only thing Rowan felt, standing barefoot on the creaky porch, was a steady warmth. A small lantern hung by the door, old and a little dented, the kind you'd expect to find in a story. It hadn't held a candle for years, and yet, as mist curled along the grass and the moon blinked wide and friendly, the lantern sighed awake and filled with a round, pearly glow, like a breath held and released. "Ah!" Rowan murmured, feeling the kind of calm that sits heavily but kindly on the shoulders. The breeze smelled like vanilla and rain. Down the hill, the river made a sound like someone shushing with a smile. Across the yard, beyond the gate where tall grasses made soft hush-hush sounds, a path was written in dew. It wasn't there in the daytime, but then again, daytime didn't know everything. The path beckoned. The lantern brightened without swinging, held perfectly quiet as if even its light remembered to be gentle. Rowan lifted it. "Just for a walk," they told the night. "A small one." The gate clicked, the kind of sound that says you'll be back. The path wound easily, never pushing, never rushing. Fireflies rose from the grass like thoughts you almost remember and then do, and somewhere owls practiced wow and who as if warming up their voices. Rowan breathed in, breathed out. Each breath matched the soft pulse in the lantern. In, a wash of mother of pearl. Out, a quieting warmth that made the bushes tuck their leaves tighter and rest. That was when the first friend found them. A little fox stepped from under a fern, its ears the color of steeped tea, its eyes acorn bright. "Are you walking to the place where everyone finds what they need?" the fox asked in a whisper that seemed to belong to night walks and secret paths. Rowan, surprised and not surprised at all, nodded. "If that's where this goes." The fox considered, nosed Rowan's ankle politely, and fell in at their heel. "I have been trying to follow a dream, but it runs like water. May I walk with you?" "Of course," Rowan said, as if they had been waiting to be asked. The lantern's glow swelled, making a tiny walkway of light, more suggestion than command. The path shifted. Dreamland never arrives all at once. First, there's the feeling, like the inside of a lullaby. Then the colors soften. Then the edges of things become less concerned about being edges at all, and you notice that shadows have flavors, cocoa, cinnamon, mint, and the wind hums a tune it heard once from a rocking chair. They crossed a small bridge, whose railings were carved to look like sleeping waves. Beneath it, the creek's water was thick with stars, as if the sky had spilled and the earth had said, "All right, I will hold this for you." Rowan leaned over. The stars in the water blinked back like friendly cats. When Rowan laughed softly, the fox laughed too, which sounded like broom bristles sweeping a hearth. On the far side, a meadow opened. Flowers, as round as teacups, nodded. Each carried a full moon, but small, like a button, nestled in its petals. At the center of the meadow stood a signpost with arrows pointing everywhere. To the cloud harbor, to the velvet forest, to the staircase of rain, to the house of little echoes, to the library of lost and found hopes. "Ah," said Rowan, reading as if tasting. "All of the above." "All of the above," agreed the fox. A moth as large as a dinner plate thumped down gently on the signpost. Its wings wore the world's quietest pattern, shorelines, a fingertips whirl, and the shape of a nap. "Tickets?" It buzzed sleepily then, looking at Rowan's lantern, seemed satisfied. "Yes, that will do." It lifted and dust fell from its wings like a blessing. "Where first?" asked the fox. Rowan let the lantern decide. It brightened toward an arrow etched in soft script, to the velvet forest. So they went, and the velvet wrapped around their ankles and around their thoughts too, softening them. Trees with bark like corduroy hummed when you brushed them. The forest smelled like pages and cocoa. Inside the velvet shadows, something shifted like a sigh, and there she was. A A tall girl with knees grass-stained and hair braided with tiny bells that didn't ring, her face lit by a reading light that seemed to hover exactly where she needed it. She held a book with no title. She looked up and smiled. "I'm Mira. I think I'm supposed to be brave," she said, "but sometimes brave feels like a coat that's a little too big." Rowan understood. "Sometimes brave is just a pocket with your hand in it," they offered. Mira's smile turned into a grin. "Can I walk with you?" She tucked the book carefully under her arm, where it turned to a bird for half a second, then back again. "There's a staircase made of rain I keep trying to climb. It's slippery." The lantern warmed in a scent. The fox wagged, a neat brushstroke of enthusiasm. They walked, and the forest leaned in to listen, which made no one nervous at all. A violin tree played itself quietly. A small storm cloud, confused but polite, bobbed along to offer a little mist if anyone looked too warm. When Mira tired, the path itself seemed to slow with her, like a friend who notices and does not make a fuss. They came at last to a clearing where the rain gathered in midair and ran up, not down, in shining steps. The staircase chimed. Each drop held a tiny fish, and each fish appeared to be reading a book. Mira looked at the steps. "I'm not sure I can do it." Rowan lifted the lantern. "You don't have to climb it all," they said gently. "Just the first step, then see." Mira nodded. She put a toe onto the first step of rain. It flexed like a heartbeat and held. She looked back, eyes round, cheeks warm with a shy pride. "It's not so slippery if you're allowed to hold on," she said, and the fox, with delicate care, balanced on the next step. Rowan stood below with the lantern, its light meeting each drop and turning it soft as satin. They climbed together, one careful step at a time, until they could see the tops of the velvet trees, where birds dozed with their heads tucked beneath their wings like commas. At the landing, a door waited. It had no knob, only a keyhole shaped like a moon. The lantern brightened, and a moonbeam, thin as thread, curled down from the sky and slipped into the lock. The door opened on the cloud harbor. Ships floated on clouds as if on milk. Some were made of folded letters. Some were the slippers you forget you are wearing. One looked like the shape you leave in a favorite chair. Sailors waved, gentle creatures with coats stitched of starlight and manners stitched of tea. The harbor master was an owl with a ledger that smelled like long summers. "Passengers," he hooted quietly. "Destination." His eyes glowed like embers wrapped in velvet. "All of the above," Rowan said again, and the harbor master seemed satisfied with such wisdom. They boarded a ship whose figurehead was a sleeping cat. On the deck, hammocks swayed. The sails were bedtime stories told in another language you still understand. The ship moved slow as a lullaby through the woolly air. From here, the land of dreams unfurled. The house of little echoes, the library of lost and found hopes, the forest of tall tea. They went everywhere. They went the way you go in dreams, which is to say, gently skipping only the parts that would have felt like hurrying. They sipped from the tall tea forest and felt courage seep in like warmth into cold fingers. They visited the house of little echoes and spoke fears into the wooden walls, which returned those fears polished into truths you can set down. They stopped at the library, where shelves went up forever, but each book came to your hand exactly when you needed it. Rowan opened a small linen-bound volume and found their own name written lightly on the first page, as if with a finger on fogged glass. The book said, "Bravery is simply the name we give to the small choice to keep going kindly." Rowan pressed the book to their chest until it sighed and turned into a pocket watch that ticked like a heartbeat. The fox received from a kindly librarian a red ribbon, which tied perfectly into a bow on its tail without anyone seeming to touch it. Mira's book whispered its title at last, and she smiled at the sound. "A map of every step you've already taken." Afternoons and evenings don't exist the same way in Dreamland. Time is a quilt. Some patches are stars, some are soup, some are naps you remember from childhood. When they were tired, hammocks appeared. When they were hungry, bread arrived hot from an invisible oven, and butter that never quite melted unless you wanted it to. Laughter found them often. Even the silence here felt like company. At the edge of the cloud harbor, they disembarked and walked the moon bridge to the Whispering Hills, where grasses tell each other stories they heard from the wind. On one hill sat a boy with a hat too big for his head and boots too big for his hat. practicing songs on a flute that sounded like remembering your favorite place. He stopped when they approached, not shy, just making space. "Name's Latch," he said, "because I used to keep things closed. Now I'm learning to open." He gestured toward the path, which had split into many threads of light, each one humming its own tune. "Mind if I come along? The place I'm going is exactly where you're headed." "All of the above," Mira guessed. Latch grinned. "That's the one." 4 travelers now, the lantern warmed like bread. Together they met a wind who'd lost its way and helped it find the direction it had meant to be traveling all along, west by kindness. They learned the language of sleeping stones, slow vowels, patient consonants. They helped a cloud untangle itself from the roof of a cottage shaped like a mitten. They took turns carrying the lantern not because it was heavy, but because it felt nice to help light the way. Night in the land of dreams is a layered thing, like sheets you pull up one by one. Under the first sheet, the stars are bright and busy, practicing their steady glimmer. Under the second, they grow soft and hazy, like thoughts drifting toward rest. Under the third, you can hear the heartbeat of the world if you press your cheek to the grass. It was under this third layer that Rowan and their friends came to the gentle giant. He sat with his knees up, chin on them, like a mountain trying to remember how to be small. Tears fell in slow drops the size of pears. Each landed without splashing, then turned into clear marbles that sang very quietly. Rowan walked up and sat by his ankle. "Hello," they said, just the word, like a cup of water. The giant sniffled. "I am supposed to be strong for everyone, but sometimes I am heavy with my own sadness," he said in a voice that sounded like rocks being washed clean. "That sounds very strong to say out loud," Mira whispered. The fox rested its chin on the giant's big toe, which made him smile a little. Latch played a few notes that sounded like putting down a suitcase after a long trip. Rowan lifted the lantern and set it beside the giant's foot, where it cast a warm circle large enough for them all to sit within. "Maybe you don't have to be strong in the way you think," Rowan said. "Maybe you can be soft and brave at once." The giant nodded, tears slowing. "Soft and brave," he repeated, as if trying on a new coat that fit. They stayed until his breathing matched the hush of the hills and the marbles stopped singing. When he slept, the ground thrummed with a comfort that spread through the roots of trees and the wings of moths and the pockets of travelers. There were challenges in the way Dreamland offers you friendly puzzles. A bridge that only appeared for those who believed they could cross. A key hidden not under the mat but inside a story they had to finish reading. A boat that would not sail unless everyone aboard agreed to go at the same pace. Each time, Rowan's lantern brightened, and each time it was not the biggest show of courage that carried them forward, but the small, steady ones. Mira taking a breath and admitting she needed a hand on a tricky step. The fox asking for a moment to feel nervous and then choosing to continue. Latch apologizing for rushing ahead and offering to match his stride to theirs. Each small bravery made the lantern glow a little kinder. One evening, or was it a morning that simply felt like evening? They arrived at the hearth of the world. It looked like a cottage and a hill and a song had agreed to live together. Smoke rose in a slow ribbon. The windows shone the particular yellow of butter and honey stirred together. A sign above the door read, "Rest as long as you need." Inside, the air was warm with cinnamon and the sound of pages turning. A kettle poured itself into cups. Chairs creaked like old friends stretching. The host was an elderly woman whose hair was a cloud held by knitting needles and whose eyes were the color of every kind of kindness. "Welcome, dears," she said, as if she had been expecting them since before they were born. "You have come far and gently." They settled. No one hurried. The host, everyone simply called her Hearth, listened as they told their travels. She nodded like a metronome set to a heartbeat. When they finished, she tucked a blanket around the fox, armchair-sized, adjusted the pillow behind Mira, book-sized, placed a bowl of plum jam by Latch, hat-sized, and set the lantern on the mantel where it reflected itself in 1,000 tiny motes of dust, each reflecting 1,000 more. "Do you know why your lantern glows?" Hearth asked Rowan, pouring another cup. Rowan shook their head. "I thought maybe because I needed it." Hearth smiled. "Exactly. You needed it, and you were willing to carry it. It glows with your willingness, not with daring deeds, not with splendor, with the quiet choice to go forward kindly, to notice gentle things, to share the light. Rowan breathed, and the breath went deep, like a seed choosing to root. The room hummed. Outside, snow began to fall, only for a minute, and only so the air would smell clean and the world would look new. Then it stopped, and the snow became blossom petals, and a breeze took them away to somewhere that needed them next. "Can we stay?" Mira asked, eyelids heavy. "As long as you need," Hearth said again, "the kind of repetition that feels like a hand on your back." They rested. Later, in the quilted time of dreamland, they woke to green lilt and bird song and a sense, distinct as the smell of toast, that it was time to go home. Dream journeys end not like doors shutting, but like music softening until you can still hear it if you listen. But your feet are already finding the familiar floor. At the threshold, Hearth pressed into each of their palms a small gift. For Mira, a ribbon bookmark that always opens to the courage you forgot you had. For the fox, a tiny bell that rings only when you're safe. For Latch, a new song with spaces in it for other people's voices. For Rowan, a key the size of a sunflower seed. "What is it for?" Rowan asked. Hearth winked. "For the next door you're brave enough to open." They stepped out. The lantern glowed as if remembering every face, every page, every quiet victory of their journey. The path led them back, not by retracing, but by recognizing. They didn't need to check the arrows now. They carried the directions in their bodies. At the gate, the fox paused, tail bow neat as ever. "Will we meet again?" "In dreams," Mira said, touching her ribbon. "And maybe also in mornings, if we are lucky." Latch tipped his hat. "I'll listen for your footsteps." Rowan hugged them both and let the hug linger until it felt finished. "All of the above," they said, and everyone smiled, because this had become a way of saying yes to the big, gentle everything. The gate clicked, the yard breathed, the porch welcomed with its soft creak. Rowan hung the lantern where it had always been, and in doing so realized something wonderful. The world looked a little more like dreamland than it had before. The colors were still the same colors, but kinder. The edges of things were still edges, but they'd learned to be friendly about it. The air smelled just a bit like cocoa in page corners. Sheets were cool, then warm. Pillows learned the exact shape of Rowan's head. As they lay down, the lantern on the porch shone once, just once, through the window, a last good night. Rowan thought of every friend and every small kindness. They understood bravery is not loud. It is the quiet choice to keep going kindly, to carry a little light. Sleep rose like a tide. Good night, dreamer. You are safe. You are loved. You are enough.